Hello, welcome to the Jason Jones Show, brother.
Thank you, Justin. Good to be with you.
It's good to be here. It's good to be here with you in Egypt, and it's been a privilege to work with you now for the past several months, serving the people of Gaza. I have to confess to you that at the Vulnerable People Project, we seek to serve communities in challenging places and times. And we've worked in Sudan, Iraq, Afghanistan, Iran, Ukraine, but we've never had a more challenging time getting medical aid or food aid to an embattled community than we have in Gaza. And you've been a miracle worker for us. And we're so grateful that we worked with you. The reason I wanted to have you on is there is a lot of there's misinformation about the people of Palestine, and there is really hateful, prejudicial rhetoric. And I would like to address some of those questions that, and I'm not judging the American people because they're very busy and our government's engaged right now in conflicts all over the world. And it would be impossible for the average American citizen to be informed on what's happening in Ukraine, in Armenia, in Taiwan, in Gaza, unless they made it their full-time job. They'd have to be a diplomat. Or they'd have to be a political scientist to kind of wrap their mind around all of the conflicts that in one way or the other, we as a country are involved, whether it's in direct military action or giving aid. So I want to address some of these statements.
Sure, yeah, Jason, thank you for having me. I mean, to start with, I would like to say that I've lived in America for the last 3 years. I traveled over 35 states, in the North, in the South, and Midwest. And I've known the American people, and I've came to love America and the American people to see the greatness of this nation. But the paradox of it for me as a Palestinian Christian and as someone who is from Gaza, I tend to see the paradox between how good the nation is and how good the people, and to a level how bad the government has been, especially on foreign policy, and especially when it comes to my country, Palestine, and to the really unconditional, and I would argue the immoral support for the state of Israel as it commits horrible atrocities in Gaza. So that's why I'm very grateful for VBB and the work you're doing, delivering aid and food and really life-saving medicine to Gaza at a time when literally the biggest and strongest power in this world are trying to prevent these really necessities of life from getting into Gaza. So I personally would like to thank you, first of all, Jason. I'm looking forward to our conversation as well.
Well, I want to start right there with what you said. You said that the biggest powers in the world are preventing aid from getting into Gaza. And a lot of Americans of goodwill believe that Hamas, the reason why there's a famine looming in the north is because Hamas is stealing the food. And if with the propaganda that the American people receive, it just makes sense. You wouldn't even have to investigate that. You go, oh, Hamas is stealing the food, that's why there's a famine. But then common sense, if you thought about it for 1 second, would go, well, wait, that doesn't make sense. There is a famine looming in the north. I want to ask you 2 questions point blank. Does Hamas steal food from the people of Gaza?
Yeah, let me start with that. I'm not a fan of Hamas. As I've mentioned, I am a Palestinian, I'm Christian. I define myself as a classic liberal. I do believe in liberalism. All of these things opposes Hamas. I mean, the idea that I'm Christian and a Palestinian opposes the idea of Islamist group, right? On the other hand, the idea that I believe in classic liberalism also opposes an authoritarian Islamist ideology. On the other hand, so I'm not a fan of Hamas. But when it comes to Hamas, the idea that Hamas is stealing...
And you bravely, as a Palestinian, been a very public critic of...
Yeah, I was in Hamas's prison years ago. I've criticized Hamas over the years. I've spoken about the crimes that Hamas has committed against Palestinians, especially against Christians. I also spoken about, war crimes when it's committed on the other side. I have nothing to be afraid of. When it comes to morality and human rights, I have been very clear as a Palestinian, as a Christian on these issues. However, when it comes to the claim that Hamas is stealing aid from the north, I think this cannot be farther from truth. Not only is it's not in the interest of Hamas to steal aid from the people, because this will make people hate Hamas, and Hamas literally is a popularist movement that survived on trying to gain legitimacy from the people on the one hand. On the second hand, I would say sorry, I will repeat that. That's first point is that not only does Hamas need the legitimacy from the people, and thus stealing it from people would make it lose its legitimacy. Point two is that even if they want to steal aid, let's assume they want to steal aid from the north, why would less than 50,000 fighters steal the food that belongs to about 2 million people? Like, what are you doing with all this food for all these months? Obviously, it's not true. But we have a numerous report from UN and Human Rights Watch and Save the Children, countless organizations that are not pro-Hamas, that do not like Hamas, that they are in the West, and they're saying clearly the state of Israel, the Israeli military forces, are preventing food and medicine from getting into Gaza. That's not a secret. It's well documented, and that's what's causing these issues.
Yeah, it's sad for me as a conservative Christian that I see so many that are in my side of the aisle, that share my political identification, that are they thoughtlessly accept the talking point that, oh, there's a famine, it's because Hamas is stealing it. When my organization announced that we would be bringing food into Gaza specifically to serve the Christian communities, I received a barrage of emails condemning me, saying that all I was going to be doing was feeding Hamas, that I shouldn't deliver food to Christians who are starving. As a Christian, from the oldest Christian community, and I'd like us to talk later about the history of your Christian community,
sure.
Can you explain to me how it makes you feel to see the majority of Christians in the English-speaking world, United States, Canada, England, Australia, New Zealand, the majority of Christians, especially evangelical Christians, sort of rooting for the ethnic cleansing of Christians from Gaza? I wonder, how does that make you feel? And when did you discover that strange dynamic that it seemed like politically Christians in the Anglosphere were aligned against the Christians in the Middle East?
You know, Jason, it's a very sad thing. And it's the unfortunate reality that it did not start with the Gaza war. It started way before the Gaza war. Matter of fact, the Christians in the West have supported the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians all the way back to the 1948. But guess what? I always explain to people that most of these people who do support even genocide and ethnic cleansing in Gaza are at heart good people, and they're not bad people. But they do support this type of ideas because at heart they're really misinformed about who the other are. It's kind of like what Martin Luther said, that people hate each other because they don't see each other.
Martin Luther King. Yeah, they hate. Say it again. Say it one more time.
It's as Martin Luther King have said before, the people hate each other because they don't see each other, and they don't see each other because they're separated from each other. And that's the reality, that American Christians don't see the Palestinian people, don't see the Palestinian Christians, and their perception and understanding from it comes from the media, and what's the media feed into them, and the media tend to demonize the Palestinian people. Now, in 1948, evangelical Christians, especially a specific group of them, those who adhere to what's called the dispensational theology, saw in the restoration of the state of Israel in 1948 as a fulfillment of prophecy. Now, the entire Christian world was celebrating that finally the Jewish people came back to their land. But guess what, Jason? My family, who lived there for thousands of years, weren't celebrating the restoration of the Jewish people. And you know what? It's not because we hate the Jewish people. It's not because we had anything to do against the Jewish people. It's because our churches and our hometowns were destroyed by the Zionist militias in 1948. You know, my family, who lived there for thousands of years, their private property was confiscated by the state of Israel. Their hometown was completely devastated. They were kicked out from their homes and they weren't allowed back. Over 30 churches were destroyed by the Zionist militias, and entire Christian villages were ethnic cleansed. And guess what? Christians in the West say that that was the will of God, and that these are the people of God returning to their land. So it makes you wonder as a Christian, what's the point of the entire New Testament? Well, the point of the entire New Testament is it's the church who are the people of God. So you're telling me that God brought the Jews to kick out some Christian community in Palestine as part of his plan? It makes me wonder, what type of God is that? Now, the good news is, Jason, that a lot of people are coming out of this theology. If you look at the statistics, actually, in the United States, it shows that dispensational theology is actually dying. But despite that dispensational theology is not dying, Christian Zionism is still strong, which at its very core, it used to be dispensations, but now there's all sort of forms of Christian Zionism, including even at the Catholic Church, and it's a dangerous phenomena, because what Christian Zionism is trying to do is take your guilt as a Christian over the horrible, horrific things that we've done against our Jewish brothers and sisters historically, and weaponize it to say that everything that Israel does today is justified, and it's a very dangerous idea. And today it's used during the war in Gaza.
You know, I don't want to bring this up. I don't like bringing this up, but we have to because of the rhetoric swirling around the war in Gaza. Ethnonationalism I find horrifying, but sort of the Christian Zionist ideology is grounded in ethnonationalism. And what's striking about it is, I mean, it's pretty easy to prove that the people with the most Jewish, ethnically Jewish community in the world, I believe first would be the Samaritans, and then it would be the Palestinians, broadly speaking. Is this fair to say?
Yeah, well, according to Hebrew University study, they found that Samaritans obviously are the closest to what used to be Israelites historically.
And they're a fascinating community.
Yeah, and
and this is the one thing like most Americans don't understand, that it was shocking to me when I started working in the Middle East.
Yeah.
How ethnically and religiously, it's not just Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, how ethnically and the religious diversity is quite spectacular and really proves salvation history.
Yeah, and the Middle East is the mother of or Abrahamic sort of religions. But they found that Samaritans are the closest to Israelites.
Yeah, Hebrew University study.
Yeah, that's Hebrew University, which is an Israeli university, and it's a Zionist university too. That they identify as a Zionist. If you open their website, you'll see a gigantic flag of Israel as the cover photo. So they found that Samaritans are the closest, and number two are the Palestinian Christians, which if you think of it for a second, it makes perfect sense, because the Bible tells us that there were those Jews in the land who converted to Christianity. They adopted Christ as their Lord and Savior, and they stayed there. So it makes sense that these are the closest people genetically there. So it makes you wonder at what point and what does it mean when Christian Zionism support the people of God being there? Do you mean the Christians who are originally Jews? Do you mean the Ashkenazi Jews who happen to have came from Europe? Do you mean those who really believe in God? Do you mean even atheist Jews who are Ashkenazim? Like, who are the people that are theologically supported? Now, I am not there to dispute that the Jewish people identity or whatever, that's their own thing. I do respect the Jewish people, I do respect their identity, etc. But when it comes from a Christian perspective, it's a matter of conscience, and it's a matter of my theology and my faith. When it comes to the Bible and my faith, I have the right as a Christian to question and to think what has been done to my people, to the Christians in Palestine, massacres, the genocidal assault in Gaza. You know, Jason, I've told you, my family, my older sister was at the St. Porphyrius Church in Gaza, one of the oldest churches in the world, actually. The third oldest church in the world, was built in the 3rd century, was bombed. Part of the compound of the church was bombed, and my sister was there, and I lost relatives in this bombing. People were being literally ripped from out of under the rubble. And then comes some Christian in America to tell me that that's the will of God for us? How ridiculous that is.
It's unbelievably ridiculous. In fact, that's how we became friends, because we share a friend who was a Zionist, a pretty hardcore Zionist.
Yeah.
And I didn't know he knew you, and I was sending him sort of updates from Gaza. And I sent him this story, and he replied, "This is my friend's sister." And
it's actually another story. It's when my sister was killed in April.
And I couldn't believe that. I said, "This is your friend's sister?" And I thought he was exaggerating, like he met you once or something like this. And he's your good friend. He's our mutual friend. And
yeah, Josh is really, I shouldn't say his name.
That's okay. You can say his first name.
Yeah, well, Josh is really great friend, and I've known him since probably 2017. He's stayed in my house in the West Bank many times. I drove him around Palestine, and I knew he did adhere to some sort, variant of Christian, Zionist Christianity. But I think his time in Palestine has challenged him. Also, I think he went through a whole process. But regardless, I was able to maintain this friendship, and that's the thing about me, Jason. Even if you adhere to some bad ideology, unless you're really willingly knows that it's bad and that there is an actual genocide happening and you're supportive of it, I tend to try to have empathy and keep the friendship and not cut it off. And I do have friends who know enough to know that there is a genocide happening in Gaza, that they know enough to know that Israel is committing horrific war crimes in Gaza, and they still support the state of Israel. These people I cannot really understand, because you're willingly supporting evil. But if you're some guy in, let's say, Tennessee, who is in some suburban area there, and your pastor is telling you every day that you should bless Israel, and you don't have access to information, because the media in America literally makes it seem like Israel is the victim all the time. I tend to have empathy with you. I tend to understand where this is coming from, because the truth is there is a power, which is the power of the media and the power of different institutions that spends a lot of money to convince you of that. So I didn't tend to have empathy. But once your eyes are open and you see the reality on the ground, if you still support certain war crimes, then I don't feel that I can accept it or have any empathy for you anymore.
Yeah, and that's what I've been shocked, not only with you, but many other Palestinians who've been personally and severely wounded themselves and lost family members, that their ability to express empathy for the Jewish people, concerned that this war is going to, we've had a lot of conversations that are concerned that this war is going to lead to a rise in Jew hatred and real anti-Semitism. I am taken aback at the Palestinian people. And I have to say that even though sort of my, I'm almost a pacifist. I hate war. And so even though from the beginning, when I saw the way Israel was progressing in the war, I was advocating for a ceasefire and condemning Israel for its behavior, I think that I really did accept a lot of the, I was formed by a lot of, by the same powerful media outlets, that I had some sort of prejudice against the Palestinian people. I want to move from sort of this bad theology to outright prejudice, because that's what we're seeing a lot of from people that are respected in the media. There was a guy named Eric Erickson, is a well-known conservative commentator, that tweeted "Flatten Gaza." I've seen elected officials say on television that 200 dead Palestinian children for one Israeli hostage is a fair deal. I've heard conservative commentators say, quote, the Palestinians are they have the lowest IQ of all people. They're the most ignorant people in the world. Like, this is really hateful bigotry. And then I see the kind of folks that you're talking about that go to the suburban church, they repeat the propaganda they hear. Let's start with one that's easy to refute, like that the Palestinians are this ignorant community.
Well, this cannot be far from truth. And that, it's well-known fact in the Arab world, actually, that the most educated Arab population, actually, in the area are the Palestinians. The literacy rate in Palestine is 99.7%. Gaza has the highest higher education rate in the Arab world as well. So it's well proven statistically. You can look at it. It's very clear there. But where this comes from, and I know this conservative commentator you mentioned, by the way, Jason, and he tend to be a Zionist. And
I'd say his name, but I don't have the quote perfect, so I'm just going to...
I'm not.
But he literally said that the Palestinians have the lowest IQ, and the Israelis have the highest IQ.
And I'm well aware of his views, and I'm well aware of what he's trying to get at, and he's not even Christian, but whatever. But his views is he's Zionist, and he believes that the state of Israel not only should have the state of Israel, but a greater Israel, which will include Gaza and the West Bank. I don't know about the Mecca part, but I think at least he believes Gaza and the West Bank, what they call Judea and Samaria, should be part of it. And to them, the Palestinians become a problem. They're a demographical problem, because the Palestinians, since day one, were the obstacle for the Zionists from establishing a Jewish state, because you're coming to a land that has a people. The entire claim that the Zionists have made, that we are coming to a land without a people, was refuted, because they come to a land
without a people for a people without a land.
Yeah, but the land had people.
Of course.
And not only people, 27% of those people were Christians, by the way. And guess what? The Christian conservatives in Palestine were the leading of the national movement. Literally, Palestinian nationalism is invented by Palestinian Christians, literally. That's why it had
What percentage of
troubles in
Palestinians today are Christian?
Historically, it was 27 before Zionism.
And then
right
after
now,
Zionism, what is it?
Right now, it's less than 1%.
You
But
see-
historically, the biggest step
And I think we need to point out, because a lot of the propaganda,
but-
they survived over 1,000 years of Muslim
of
rule.
course.
But then after less than
I'm not
100
saying
years
that,
of
yeah,
Zionism,
I'm not saying that the era of the Islamic Khalifa in the region was perfect. It was not. And we had certain periods of persecution like the rest of the Christians under the Muslim rule. But they survived and they were able to live, and it was 27% of the population. But the biggest step back we've had is in the creation of the State of Israel in 1948. Because people were pushed to Lebanon, to Jordan, to Gaza, to other places. And then incrementally what happened, as war after war after wars kept waging, the Christians start leaving for economical reasons. And they lived in a higher rate than the Muslims because they had better languages. You know, the missionaries coming to Palestine taught them French, so they lived to France, taught them English, so they lived to England, to America, to etc. So we had access to the Western world. Because the Christians in the Middle East play a role of a bridge between the West and the East. But all that to say that to these people, why do you want to make the Palestinians seem like a subhuman? They're the dumbest, they're the stupidest, they're the most disgusting. It's because they're a problem and we have to get rid of them. We want the land and we don't want the people. Because if you have the people, it cannot be a democratic and Jewish state anymore. It will be only apartheid, which I would argue today the situation in the West Bank is an apartheid. On the other hand, yeah, that's all. I think.
Well, I want to go to that then. The point, we're told that it's not an apartheid state, that there are Palestinians who have Israeli citizenship and they're full citizens. They have the same rights as Jews. They'll say that there are elected representatives in government who are Palestinian. Is that true? Partly true? Not true? Yeah.
I'll tell you something about the Zionist propaganda that people have to understand very well. The Zionists never lie a complete lie. They always take half of the truth and generalize it. And when you take half of the truth and you generalize it, it becomes a lie. And that's all the Zionist propaganda. They'll get you half of the truth. For example, it is true that some Palestinians within the State of Israel have Israeli citizenship. There are about, I think, over 1 million Palestinians there. But it is true too that there are over 300,000 Palestinians in Jerusalem which consider Israel that have no rights whatsoever in terms of citizenships and votes, etc. But what they don't tell you is that up until 67, they did not have citizenship. They were under martial law, literally, the Israeli Palestinian citizens. They were under martial law. And only when Israel occupied the West Bank and Gaza, they gave them citizenship because they had a new population to oppress, kind of.
Okay, we discussed the talking point. There's a famine in the north in Gaza because the Hamas is stealing all of the food. That's obviously not true. There's another talking point that we hear quite a bit. And I have to say that when I heard it coming from American politicians, it struck me as just off the bat odd. And this is the talking point. Whenever the casualty numbers come out, for example, there are over 15,000 dead children, about 20,000 missing children. So we can assume there's nearing 40,000 dead children in Gaza. So when these striking numbers come out that are horrific, the politicians flood, the newsrooms, look cameras in the eye and say, here's the talking point, you ready? Israel is the most moral army in the history of the world.
I mean, as you can see, I'm laughing. I mean, you cannot hear this and not laugh. I mean, not only because the very idea of a most moral army in the world is just a bizarre idea, and also because an American politician who's supposed to love his own country and be a patriot assumes that an military of a foreign government and of a foreign country is more moral than their own military. It's really bizarre. But let's put this aside. The actual evidence we have today of war crimes that Israel is committing in Gaza and that have committed even before the Gaza war is astonishing. There is so much evidence out there. As you mentioned, 15,000 kids were killed in Gaza, children. I can tell you what happened at the church when they bombed the church on October 19th, 2023. I can tell you when they shoot two Catholic women at the church of the Holy Catholic, of the Holy Family Church in Gaza. Even Pope Francis called it terrorism. I can tell you when they did not allow my father to receive the medicine he needed at the church, and he died because they prevented the ambulance. And I can tell you when my 18-year-old sister died because they did not allow her also to have an ambulance as she was walking from the north to the south. Guess where? In what's so-called safe road. The safe road that you're forced to walk in under the heat for 6 hours, and the military sees you and doesn't allow you to have a public transportation, does not allow you to have an ambulance. What kind of morality does the Israeli army possess? I actually argued, Jason, I've told you before, that the type of morality Israel possesses today and with its military is paganism. It's a pre-biblical justice that they believe in. The idea that the collective punishment is okay, that we can punish the entire Palestinian nation for the sin of you Palestinians. This is a pagan idea. This is a pre-Bible idea. Strange for a country that claims that their connection to the land is based on the Torah. It's based on the first five books of Moses. But the idea of collective punishment, the idea of negating and erasing the personhood of the person that the Bible itself has founded in a way, is really strange.
And a lot of these are Christians who are dying. For example, your 18-year-old sister and your father.
Yes, they are Christians. And obviously, we have to be unequivocally clear that the life of a Christian person is worth the same as a life of a Jewish person and is worth the same of a life of a Muslim person. So there's nothing unique about my sister that makes her, she shouldn't have been killed by Israel because she's Christian. All my Muslim friends, and I have lost one of my best friends, Muhammad Yaghi, who was a photographer, with his wife and with his kid. He was a Muslim. One of my best friends was killed as he was in his home. He was assassinated with his wife, with his child, baby, who I didn't get to see or hold. They were killed, all of them. The entire family was wiped. And then they come and tell you, oh, the most moral army in the world. What type of a joke?
It's a striking talking point, isn't it?
It's a striking, but
it's a talking point. Do they believe it? Does anyone? Maybe if your morality is that Israel has the right given to them by God to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians, and they're working to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians in some sick way, they believe that this is moral. Because, you know, it says in John, there will come a day when they will cleanse you, when they will persecute you and think they're doing an act to God. And I feel like some of these people who are tweeting out flatten Gaza, they believe that they're doing an act to God.
It's quite possible. It's quite possible. And you know what leads to that? That someone with really straight face tell you flatten Gaza. A rabbi in the US said, make Gaza a parking lot. An Orthodox rabbi. What leads someone to say this with immunity and without fear is years and years and decades of dehumanization.
What would happen if a Palestinian representative went on television and said, make Tel Aviv
a parking lot? He'll be canceled. He probably would be fired from every other job.
What if Tucker Carlson said that?
Oh, he'll be like, you know, he's already been called white supremacist, the most evil person on earth, for hosting Monday Isaac to talk about Christians in Palestine. So of course he can't say that. But when it comes to these,
I would say that the people he's defending are darker than the people he's defending them against. But yet Tucker Carlson's a white supremacist. It's striking rhetoric, isn't it?
It is striking, and it's interesting that this type of cancel culture and this type of, you know, cancel everyone that we don't like does not apply when it comes that this dehumanization and racism is against the Palestinians. And these are actually actual racism. It's not like, you know, you could disagree with Tucker, thinks otherwise, and I happen to disagree a lot with Tucker, but I don't think he's an actual racist. I really don't.
No.
But these people are actual racists, and somehow you don't even hear a word about it. You don't see the New York Times writing about it. You know what? The New York Times is an interesting case because the New York Times tend to report on everything in the world. When it comes to Palestinian deaths, always the headline something like Palestinian die, not killed. In the same headline, it will be a Palestinian die, an Israeli soldier killed. Well, a civilian just died by himself, who the Israeli soldiers killed, and the Israeli soldiers are killed. Language has power, and it means a lot. And this is the type of prejudice and disgusting racism that we as Palestinian people are facing.
Well, how is it that a mainstream conservative commentator can go on rants about how stupid Palestinians are, and then the mainstream media, who likes to kick conservative commentators, leaves that completely untouched?
That is an interesting question. I think you should pose it to New York Times.
I don't think they open my mail.
I don't think either.
I've been submitting op-eds to them for 25 years, and I've never gotten even a single response.
I think that here's the thing, Jason. I think there is consensus in the Western media. Sadly, the conservative and the liberals, with some outliners, that prejudice against the Palestinians is okay. There is consensus. There is obviously always outlines. You'd see one piece here and there where people pushed enough to speak about it. And I'm very grateful for all the voices who are speaking about it, including, by the way, our Jewish brothers and sisters in the US who are saying, no, prejudices against the Palestinians is not okay. It's not okay what the ADL is pushing against the Palestinians. It's not okay what AIPAC is pushing against the Palestinians. I'm very grateful for these Jewish brothers and sisters. I'm grateful for Christian conservatives and for liberals, for anyone who sees the humans as humans. I believe that human rights is not an issue where we can compromise on.
It's striking, right? First of all, some of the loudest, most courageous voices on the war in Gaza defending the Palestinians are Jewish. It's quite mysterious. So many of them are very conservative. So many of them are very progressive. Then you see people who are icons of the left and icons on the right, united against trying to defend Israel and its war crimes. What do you think connects? It's such a strange coalition. It's both sides transcend politics. Both sides transcend ideology. What is it that connects those who are speaking up for the Palestinians, and what is it that connects those who are defending the war crimes of the IDF?
This is interesting. Obviously, it's much more complicated because each subgroup approaches from a different perspective. And I will give you an example. For example, like pro-Palestine people who are on the left tend to approach it from a view of social justice, right? That's the issue. I've met
anti-colonialism.
Yeah, anti-colonialism, etc. And there is certain valid points in what they were bringing. The conservatives who are defending Palestine are defending the personhood, the idea of the person, and how, you know, life is very important because we value life and God gives life, and they want to defend it. They're also defending the idea that you cannot confiscate someone else's private property, etc. They're defending the idea that you cannot just massacre Christians or children, and this can be an answer. There's all these issues. And on the pro-Palestine, on the Jewish people who are pro-Palestine, I feel like it's a sense of that they were connected so much with Israel, and they realized all of a sudden that their connection to Israel was based on something wrong, which is the denial of the crimes that Israel have committed in 1948. And this brings in them certain passion, and as one Jewish friend of mine brings in him a certain fire that he feels he has to expose the lies that have been taught to him, that he has to do something about it. On the pro-Israel side, there's so many. I mean, we discussed the theology, we discussed the dehumanization of the Palestinians. There is racism as well involved in the issue, etc. But there's another subject that no one wants to talk about, which is money. There's a lot of money involved in the pro-Israel activism. And I'm not talking about it in some sort of conspiracy theory, well, oh, Zionists control the world. No, I don't think Zionists control the world. Matter of fact, they're losing the world because the world starts seeing how awful what actions Israel is doing. But they do tend to have this disproportionate amount of money compared to other group of people.
Or a willingness to sacrifice and deploy it for the cause.
Yeah, maybe that, right? Maybe they don't have as much money, but maybe they're willing to use it in more collective manners than the rest of the people. And they're using it very, very, very good. The same groups, it's amazing. The same group that sponsor conservatives on the far right sponsor progressives. It's amazing to me. They pour money into
the same billionaire.
The same billionaires.
We could name them. Yeah, yeah. The same billionaires are funding the trans movement and are funding the Christian Zionist organization.
That's amazing. It's amazing to me that
you know who you are. You know who you are. Everyone knows who you are. You fund the trans movement. You fund the Christian Zionist movement, and it's strange.
It is strange because you do both of these things at the same time. And then like always, I always tell people like you want to understand like beside the ideological part, you have to look into ideology is very powerful. You want to understand why a certain person talking certain way when it comes to Israel and Palestine? Track their money. There will be always some money in there.
Well, a friend of mine today meant to give me constructive advice and said, Jason, you speaking out on behalf of the people of Gaza is going to limit your ability to do your aid work around the world. And he said, you're going to have to decide. And I said, well, when I founded the Vulnerable People Project, my number one thought was I wanted to create a platform to advocate for those who no one else will stand for, primarily with words. Even in our actions, whether it's delivering aid to Gaza, delivering aid under very difficult circumstances, we're doing this for catechetical reasons. We're doing this to teach, to exemplify. These people are so precious that we're going to spend all of this money. Our team members are going to risk their life to deliver aid. In fact, this year we lost a team member in Sudan seeking to evacuate a religious order.
It's horrible.
And these actions are designed to communicate with the world. These people are precious. These people are important. But you know, just today, and it was kind of a veiled threat, you know, like, well, how are you going to raise money? There's going to be consequences. Well, guess what? When I stood with the Uyghur, I was given the same warnings. Like, don't mess, you know, if you upset China, you'll lose donors who'll be afraid of standing with you. You know, so I'm always told whenever we stand with a new embattled community, we're told that there's risk. I can't help but feel, though, that there is more risk standing with the Palestinians than other communities. I'm not naive to that fact. But I realized, and I had a little internal dialogue with myself that said, if you can't stand with the Palestinians, every community you stand with is a lie.
No, and it's true because you gotta be more consistent, right? But it's not only the money, Jason, there, that because the pro-Israel folks will obviously try to prevent you from having money, but the second thing to try to do, which they mastered actually, and I was talking to a friend about that, actually the founders of the cancel culture were the pro-Israel groups. You know, it's actually funny because there's this one, actually I would name her, there's Barry Weiss. You probably heard of Barry Weiss. She made a name of being the anti-culture woman, right? Well, she started his career canceling people at Columbia University who are pro-Palestine. She happened to be Jewish, she happened to be pro-Israel, and she's against cancel culture when it comes to her and the ideas that she likes, but when it comes to canceling other people, it's totally normalized. And I'm afraid that that's the root of cancel, or not, I'm afraid that big portion of how cancel culture took a grab on the American people, it's because they normalize it when it comes to the state of Israel and the criticism of the state of Israel.
Yeah, I want to kind of maybe shift gears on that. And then I want to get to something more serious. A lot of folks have a reaction. You talk about this professor from Columbia that was canceling people who are pro-Palestinian. You have a lot of social conservatives and Christians who have been flooded with Christian Zionist propaganda through their churches, through their Bible studies, through Christian media. And then they turn on the television, they see Trans for Gaza. They see those who were associated with radical organizations burning down American cities just a few years ago, or that stand with radical left causes, AntiAmericanism, burning American flags, things like this. And I have to say, even in me, when I see that, it creates an emotional reaction. But as a Palestinian, you want to take help where you can get it. But, you know, it is striking, right, that you have evangelical Christians standing with Israel as they are ethnically cleansing the north of Gaza, where all the Christians are, starving them. And then you'll have trans ideologues that the media says are quote unquote standing with Hamas. And my evangelical Christian friends will say, it's ridiculous that those trans will stand with Hamas. I'm like, well, I don't actually know if that's what they're doing. But I think it's ridiculous that you're standing with the state of Israel, not the Jewish people, not the Israeli people. You're standing with the state of Israel that is committing war crimes that if America did this, you would lose your mind. And I know this because I have criticized a lot of our drone program, our seeking to topple Assad, I oppose the invasion of Iraq, and a lot of my conservative friends now thank me for that courageous stand, although at the time, not so
was
much.
famous, yeah.
But it's striking, right? You want to address that these...
Sure. So the sad part is that it is true that the American, the sad part is it is true that the Palestinian movement or the pro-Palestine movement have taken more and more anti-Americanism stand historically. And the reason why it's because Israel has been supported by America unconditionally. You're trying to take the support you get, and America is making it clear that they're committed to the state of Israel and wouldn't support the Palestinian rights. And thus the natural sort of response from a lot of pro-Palestinians is to move more toward, the sort of woke leftists who tend to take good stands. And I'm not there to demonize these people who think they're bad. I think there is certain level of actual morality that they want to stand with the Palestinians as they're massacred. And I do respect that. But what I don't respect is anyone trying to burn the American flag, for example, or attack it. Because as a Palestinian patriot myself, I do understand and I do respect American patriots who love their flag, who are, love their country, who don't want to bomb my country or kill my people or even support the genocide that's happening there. So I get that. And I can tell you that historically, there has been so many Palestinian thinkers who really thought very highly of American founding fathers. I can tell you of one of my favorites, Khalil Sakakini, who lived before the establishment of the State of Israel, before 1948. And one of his autobiographies, he writes the following. He says, there is one nation on this earth that haven't colonized another nation, haven't had inspired to imperialism, and this obviously before America started.
He didn't live long enough.
Yeah, he didn't live long enough.
Oh, the good old days, we call it.
Yeah, and he says
he liked my America.
Yeah, your America.
He would have been a Pat Buchanan supporter. Okay.
So he said, and it's America. It's not France. He said we can't trust the French because they're imperialist. We can't trust the British, but we can't trust the Americans. He died before he's seen what America has become, obviously, supporting all these wars. Palestinian philosopher Sarin Sabi, also in one of his books, write very beautifully about, Thomas Jefferson and others. We really were inspired by them. But why these movements didn't take hold? It's because America didn't take the stance that we would expect them in terms of morality to take with the Palestinians.
Yeah, and this goes back to the challenges of the Cold War and the short-term strategy of the United States. I want to go back to this, that you were, I want to talk about where you were early October, late September of last year.
Yeah.
What was your life? What were you doing?
I was in the US. I have finished my first master's at American University, and I was starting a second master's at Catholic University.
What was your master's in American?
I studied comparative politics, so a form of political stance.
Feel like Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
By the way, American University has one of the best programs in the country on comparative politics.
Yeah.
That's a good program.
That's right.
What were you studying at Catholic U?
So I went to Catholic U to study human rights from a Catholic perspective, a Christian perspective, and I really enjoyed my time there. But when the war happened, and
that's deep. I mean, I envy you, because if there's one program I would like to be in,
it's a really great program. But unfortunately,
but before the war, I don't even want to get to the war yet. Like, so okay, you were going to school.
Yeah, I had a really quite good life comparatively. I was working as a political analyst. I was building this new organization I'm building, the Agora Initiative. Me and a co-founder, a Jewish co-founder actually with me, to try to promote constitutional democracy in Israel and Palestine. And we had quite, positive steps toward it. And then the war happened.
Well, you sound like Theodore Herzl there. A little bit, right?
Yeah.
I mean, didn't he want a constitutional democracy without segregation, without an apartheid state, with everyone, Christians, Jews, Muslims, Arabs participating?
Yeah, there's so much scholarly debate about what Theodore Herzl really wanted. But like the one thing I think most of scholars would say, that whatever exists today in Israel would be foreign to what Theodore Herzl really thought of. Although majority of Palestinians have the most, extreme negative view of Herzl, and I'm not a fan of him either. Yeah. But I mean, for historical accuracy, one can say that he wasn't as bad as the guys we have today.
Yeah, I suspect he would have been horrified at what's happening today.
I don't think he was thinking of ethnic cleansing, nor he was thinking that we have to, establish an apartheid. In one of his letters to the mayor of Jerusalem, his last name is Al-Khaldi, he says that we would want to come and this would help the Arabs. And if you disagree to us coming as the natives, we wouldn't come back. So even Herzl and others did recognize that the Palestinians are the natives and that they're coming as non-natives.
So here we go with a Jewish partner, founding a nonprofit for peace and Bible. I believe you're both right. Like,
yeah.
The Israelis and the Palestinians, the Jews, the Christians, the Muslims, the Druze, the others who live there, their interests are shared interests.
Exactly. And
they're not going to have a peaceful future separate from cooperation.
Exactly.
Yes?
Yeah, and then the war happened, and the day after, second day of the war, my house was bombed in Gaza. My family became displaced, and I wasn't able to continue my studies. And I said, I already have one master's. I really can't carry on with it. So I dropped my master's. I sought asylum in the U.S. And then, in December, my father was killed. And then
before we get there, the second day of the war, your home was bombed.
Yeah.
Tell me, why was that neighborhood targeted? Was it a Christian neighborhood?
It wasn't a Christian neighborhood. It's a mixed neighborhood. But the west of Gaza and this specific part, which is west of Rimal, was bombarded. The entire neighborhood was destroyed in a matter of 2 days. All of a sudden, they start bombarding.
How many civilians?
I don't know how much were killed there, but when they first bombed few buildings, people understood that a lot of bombing were happening there, so a lot of people left. But I think there were hundreds of civilians killed there, at least hundreds.
Were these military targets?
No, there were no military targets.
Why would the most moral military in the world target neighborhoods?
I think it was quite clear in Israeli media too that Israel used an AI machine to just generate targets based on just information fed to the AI, and they would just target places without, They
were like a little kid with a magic 8-ball.
Yeah, and they called them power targets. Power targets means it's a targets that are not military, but you bomb them in order to terrorize the population enough that you win the war.
So terrorism was the goal.
There is no question in my mind that Israel have used terrorism historically against the Palestinians and against the Lebanese people as well. I mean, you look at what's called the Dahiya doctrine, which is a military doctrine that Israel has adopted, named after the neighborhood Dahiya in Beirut, which literally says you have to devastate an entire city in order to establish deterrence, and that's what Israel is doing in Gaza. They destroy the entire city's infrastructure, hospitals, schools, etc., so you restore deterrence.
So here you are in the United States, and your family's home was bombed. They had fled?
They fled to the church.
They fled to the church. This was October 9th, when your home was bombed.
Mm-hmm.
And then now your family's in St. Porphyus?
They were at the Holy Family Catholic Church.
Oh, they were at Holy Family Catholic Church. And then can you take us from there?
Yeah, so life continued. The siege started making life harder and harder, and the lack of food, lack of medicine, etc. Then on December 16, the church started becoming surrounded with Israeli tanks, and the 2 Catholic women, the famous story, were killed by Israeli snipers. 2 days from the...
Can you tell that story? Because the story's shocking.
Sure.
People will tell me to my face that's I'm a lie.
Yeah.
Or what were they doing, or were they
So
Hamas?
the Israelis were surrounding the area. The tanks were everywhere. That day, too, they killed 3 Israeli hostages who ran away.
That's right.
Naked, with white flags, screaming in Hebrew, in their own language, and yet they shot them, killed the 3 of them, which shows clearly that there were orders to kill anyone moving. And the Catholic Church, within the compound, there is the church right here, and there's the restroom outside. 2 older women walking very, very slow. One older woman and her daughter, holding her hand to take her to the restroom, were shot in the head and killed, both of them, by Israeli snipers. And 7 Catholic men who tried to come out and carry them were shot in the legs. 7.
So the goal was to kill the women and to wound the men.
It was very clear.
And that's the sniper technique for people to understand that they didn't kill the men because they wanted to cause chaos and burden systems.
And they were left at the church without medical care. 2 days after this, also my father seems like he had a panic attack or heart attack and died due to lack of medicine.
Okay, so your family left your home, and then you went to Holy Family Catholic Church, and now the war's been progressing. I have to imagine you have survivor's guilt. I mean, what was going on in these weeks and months?
Yes, it's a sense of pain. you're in the country that is actually financing. I mean, my taxpayer, I'm not an American citizen yet, but I'm paying my taxes to the American government, right? And the American government signed a bill to give $50 million to Israel. The very state
15
that
billion.
15 billion.
Yeah.
The very state that killed my father during the war, the very state that destroyed
When
my
did your
home.
father die? What day?
It was the 21st of December, one day after my birthday. My birthday was on the 20th. So I slept and I woke up to the news of my father being killed. Then my family's at the church and we decided we're not going to leave Gaza. You know, my grandparents have been forced from Mashdal, a city that today within the boundaries of the state of Israel. And as a Palestinians, we decided we're not going to repeat that mistake. We'll be forced out of there. But as my father died, as the situation started getting worse, then there is no food, literally.
I want to emphasize this for people because they say Israel's letting them leave. Why don't they just leave? Why doesn't the Pope or the Patriarch or others let them leave or encourage them to leave? Why don't their neighboring countries invite them in? And this is the fear. It's ethnic cleansing.
Of course, it's ethnic cleansing. It's Israel doesn't want Palestinians in there, and if they leave, they wouldn't be let back. And I don't know any other context where Christians are saying basically, oh, let this land be without Christians.
They didn't say this in Artsakh when Azerbaijan was ethnically cleansed.
Exactly. It's our homeland. It's our homeland. We lived there for thousands of years. It's ours.
Actually, longer than the Christians lived in Artsakh, which they lived there 1900 years. It's a pretty long time.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in that region, but yeah. So we don't want to leave. But then it got so hard where we said, okay, we will leave to Egypt. And that was the journey where my sister and my mother were walking in April 24th, 2024. And my sister just collapsed and died. And she could have been saved. She collapsed in the heat on that road.
It was just heat stroke.
We don't know what it was. It was the fear, it was dehydration. We don't know what it was. But all what we know, if even she had a donkey, she would have survived. If she didn't have to walk over 7 kilometers. If any of the Israeli soldiers who saw her there was able to give her water or to give her a ride or to allow car there, she wouldn't be killed. If they allowed an ambulance, she wouldn't have been killed. But that's the type of brutal enemy we're dealing with. This is why we're describing what Israel is doing Gaza as genocidal, because when your president comes out and he says we're not dealing with humans, we are dealing with subhumans, when he says that our war is not against Hamas only, it's against the entire Palestinian people.
Netanyahu said this.
This is not Netanyahu, this is Herzog, who's considered liberal in Israel. He's considered liberal, more liberal than Netanyahu. Netanyahu said something worse. He said we are at war against the Amalek.
And Christians have said this.
And Christians
Can you explain this to people who aren't religious? What does this mean?
The Amalek from the Torah, from the Bible and the Old Testament, is a concept where the Israelites had to literally completely annihilate another nation.
Because they did human sacrifice.
Yeah, they're evil people, etc. So
but they're calling Christians, who are descendants from the apostles.
Yeah.
They're comparing them to a people that did human sacrifice.
They are saying that we are the Amalek. So I do look at what happened.
Is that not that's ethnonationalism?
At its core.
Yeah.
This is ethnonationalism at its core, and it's very much extremist form. So looking at us as this, my sister passed away. My mother was at a coma for 2 days.
Your sister didn't pass away, brother. She was murdered.
She was murdered.
Now, can we walk through what happened? Because there's people right now who are like, well, this is the most moral military in the world. What happened? Was she hiding Hamas? Was she sheltering? Walk people through how your sister...
It was completely safe. This is the safe road that Israel said you can leave through. They went through the Israeli checkpoint, and they have to be forced to walk 7 kilometers from the north of Gaza to the south of Gaza. And as she was walking, she just collapsed. And they weren't allowing anyone to come help her.
Did
my
people
friends,
try to help her?
My friends who are Muslims tried to come against the wills and against the law of what Israel wants, and they were shot at to try to get into from the other side. But when they arrived, it was too late. So imagine, this is the context.
Your friends risk your life. Muslim friends risk your life for your Christian
Muslim
sister.
friends came to save my sister with their own car, despite the Israeli shooting at them. This is the Muslims that the Zionists tried to dehumanize us, that they are the most evil. And the Israeli Jewish soldiers were shooting at them, and they didn't help my sister. That's the type of evil we're dealing with.
They watched your sister die.
They watched her die.
And they shot at those who tried to save her.
And that's a road that, if you look behind you, or if you try to pick up something from the ground, they're going to shoot you. That's most likely why she died. She was so scared. Her water fall down. My mom told her, grabbed the water. She said, "No, I'm not gonna do it. They'll kill me." Because she's seen and she heard so much stories of how
she's been living around death and destruction.
Exactly.
Her father died.
Yeah.
Her home was bombed. She's scared to death. She's an 18-year-old girl. I mean, these stories, the only military I can compare this to when I hear the stories, I hate to say it, is ISIS.
That's the unfortunate reality. Even what's happening in Ukraine doesn't go that
No,
way.
I've been to Ukraine since the war.
And it's horrific what's happening there.
But there's no comparison. There's really no comparison. There's no compare. You can just look at the casualties, the amount of bombs dropped. And yet we're constantly told how brutal Russia is.
Exactly.
And we're told that Israel's the most moral army in the world. Now your sister died, who you loved. Can you tell us about her?
She was 18 years old. I'm much older than her, and she treated her like my daughter. She was full of life. She was born to a state where there is always war. There's always occupation. There's always violence from the Israelis. And she really had dreams to leave Gaza, to start a new life. She were thinking she'll come to college to the US and she would just be able to attend university and church freely without fear of being bombed or killed. But
so she was a devout Catholic?
She was Catholic, yeah. My mom is Catholic.
Was she very Catholic, or?
I wouldn't say very, but she attended every mass on Sunday.
You said she wanted to go to church freely, and
yeah.
Did you tell her stories about school in America? Did she like to hear these stories?
Yeah, she did. She was excited about it. She was waiting to get out, and she was hours away from that, but she wasn't allowed to.
I don't know what to tell you. Here we are. I want to move past this, and I want to make a very important point. We've been doing a lot of work together. You've been a blessing to the Vulnerable People Project, getting aid. It's very scary to send a lot of money to a country around the world and to ask a gentleman to distribute that money you haven't met. We trusted you. We've met you through shared friends, and you've gone above and beyond. You've done more than we've asked. You've asked us to, you've given us a lot of opportunities to be useful. But you're a young man, and you keep your chin up. And in our first conversation, drifted, and I didn't know how you were going to I wasn't thinking. I just speak my heart to anyone I'm talking to. I don't think, what is their perspective sometimes? And I had said, one of my great fears is that the behavior of the government of Israel is going to foment a virulent, disgusting Jew hatred.
Mm-hmm.
And then you and I, it was like we both think the same thoughts. We were talking about liberalism properly understood is the only hope for a world order and peace. And you had shared with your great concern that the behavior of the government of Israel is going to foment Jew hatred. And then as you're talking, I'm looking at you going, but your sister was killed by the IDF. And I'm going to tell you now, if the IDF killed my sister, I wouldn't be having this. If someone said this to me, I might smack them. Can you explain to me, as your people are being cleansed from the face of the earth, your father died, your sister was murdered, and your mother collapsed into a coma from shock when she was with your sister when she died. In the midst of all of this, you have bandwidth to kind of see where this could go.
Yeah.
And how Israel, which is a quote unquote Jewish state, did this to your family. Yet in the midst of this, you've constantly expressed concern for me.
Sure.
And by the way, the anti-Arab hate is totally accepted.
Sure.
All the nonsense.
Yeah.
Anti-Semitism is recognized.
Yeah.
So people can care less about what's happening to Arabs. And as you said, and if they're Muslim, forget about it. Maybe if they're Christian, they'll pretend to care.
Maybe,
They don't, but they'll pretend.
Yeah.
Yet, then you still have space to be thoughtful of this. How? Where does this
Well,
come from?
to me, it takes moral consistency. You're either morally consistent or you're not moral, as far as I'm concerned. You cannot be just moral about anti-Semitism or anti-Arab and accept, for example, anti-Chinese or anti-white people, for example. It takes moral consistency on all these issues. This is number one. Number two, as a Christian, you either take the Bible and the personhood of Jesus seriously and what he had taught or not. And if you take the teaching of Jesus seriously, you are ought to love even your enemy. And what does this mean? It does not mean you have to fall in love with them in the sense that you have to accept their evil deeds, but it means that you have to go beyond what any, even, let's say, quote-unquote, rational person would want to go beyond to understand things as it is. And I have done my duty on that regard. And I do distinguish between the Jewish people and the government of the State of Israel. In the same regard, I do distinguish between even the American people and the government, the American government, what they've done. If this distinguish disappears, we become pagans. We start, just persecuting all the people for the collective of what the government did or a group. We become like Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden literal logic when he targeted America and the great terrorism of 9/11 is that the American government has done such and such and such bad things in the Middle East, so we're responding. But that's the same logic the Zionists are doing in Gaza today. Hamas on October 7th done such and such, thus we can kill everyone. We can do whatever we want over there. I refuse to be like the Zionists. I refuse to be like Osama bin Laden. I choose to be human and I choose to be Christian. And if you are Christian, you have to stand against anti-Semitism. And if you're human, you have to stand against anti-Semitism. However, the sad part is that a lot of the Zionist Jewish people around the world are not helping us to fight anti-Semitism. They're not helping us when we walk to their spaces and the flags of Israel are there, everywhere. They're not helping us when we walk to their spaces and they're saying, yes, we support the genocide in Gaza. I'm not saying all Jewish people are this way, but I'm saying there's...
The majority of American Jews oppose what's happening
in Gaza.
Palestinians.
Yeah, sure.
This is tremendous.
Yes. But there are those, even if they're minority, that they are too loud. And these people feed into anti-Semitism around the world. When people are seeing that a black woman like Candace Owen, despite that I disagree with her about a lot, being canceled for saying it's not okay to kill Christian babies in Gaza, what is this gonna do? It's just going
How
to
is that
produce
even
anti-Semitism.
possible? How are we here?
Impossible.
How are we even here?
I can't
They
believe
try
it.
to cancel a black woman for saying don't kill brown babies.
I can't believe it.
And they say, oh, that's something a white supremacist
And this
would
is
say.
from
she is a white supremacist.
Yeah.
A black woman says don't kill brown babies. White supremacist.
And that is from a media that was established in the whole like anti-cancel culture, founded by this, I would call him a clown, Ben Shapiro.
Night child.
An actual
Just an angry little child.
and whiny
little clown, yeah.
who has
Not
demonized
conservative, by the way.
everyone else.
No, he's been wrong on
And claims
COVID.
to
He was
be.
wrong on abortion. He slowly got around and he said he was pro-life. No, it's quite shocking to me. Yeah, but yet there you are, authentically concerned about an upswing in anti-Semitism.
Absolutely, and I would stand, and I told you that, Jason, if there is a genuine, and there is a lot of horrific, genuine anti-Semitism in the U.S., if it become a point where there is an actual anti-Semitism in the U.S. or anywhere in the world that threaten our Jewish brothers and sisters, we will be the first to stand against them. And I can tell you, this is an opinion not only shared by Palestinian Christians, but a lot of Palestinian Muslims.
I found this out. By the way, I had a lot of prejudice against Palestinian Muslims that I wouldn't have held against Palestinian Christians. But one can't help but when you're just, even if I was trying to be conscious that when I audit my own thoughts, when I sit there and I step back and why am I shocked when I hear a Palestinian Muslim express concern for Jew hatred?
Because they've held you so
It's because I held to a prejudice.
Yeah, and because they've said for so long, oh, Muslims hate Jews, Muslims hate Jews. That's not true. The Jews have had it way better in the Muslim world, pre-World War II, pre the establishment of the State of Israel, than in Europe. They lived better. They actually came refugees from Europe to Morocco and other Muslim countries. Things have changed after the creation of the State of Israel. When you claim this state is Jewish, then you sort of claim to represent the Jewish people when you commit crimes, and that's a problem.
And this is too big for us to get into right now, but the people of the Middle East were ambushed by history with the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. Sykes-Picot Agreement, Balfour
Yeah.
Declaration. History is ambushed. This is why I don't even want to get into it.
Yes.
But it's like, how does one, we're all born into history, how do we behave? And I think we order ourselves to peace, to advocating for the most vulnerable communities and the most vulnerable people within our communities.
I agree.
And I want to thank you for being our partner in this. And I'll just say, there are places in the world today where it's very dangerous to be Jewish, for example, in Africa. And the Vulnerable People Project provides security. I'm proud to say we provide physical security, armed guards and cameras for synagogues, mosques, and churches around the world that are at real threat to extremist attacks.
Well, that's really amazing.
And in the midst of all of this, though, there's no community on earth right now is as vulnerable than the families in Gaza. And I would say I would add Sudan to that right now too, which is a catastrophe.
Indeed.
But I just want to thank you for your courage. I want to thank you for being our partner. I want to thank you for your example. And in the midst of all that has happened to your sister, this was just 90 days ago, brother. I mean, it's unimaginable what has happened to your family in the past 12 months. The vulnerable communities around the world have a shared interest, and their interest is in that we see their dignity, and that we are empathetic, that we have empathy, and that we stand in solidarity with them. And I want to thank you for helping us serve the families of Gaza.
Thank you, Jason, and I really appreciate you and all what VBP has been doing for people around the world, not only in Gaza.
All right, thank you, brother.
Thank you. God bless.